Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new The Hacker Factory podcast with hacker maker Phillip Wylie. You're about to discover what the role of a professional hacker entails, the different specializations it holds, and what it takes to learn and become one. Enjoy the conversation as Phillip and guests unveil the secrets of professional hacking, a mysterious, intriguing, and often misunderstood occupation. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Hacker Factory podcast. I'm your host, Phillip Wylie. I refer to myself as the hacker maker because I like mentoring, teaching, and helping people get started in the offensive cybersecurity area as pen testers, researchers, or bug bounty hunters. Each episode, I have someone really interesting to talk to share their story about their journey into cybersecurity. And they all have some really interesting stories, and today's guest is not an exception. So I have my good friend Samuel Kimmons on here. We met years ago before Texas Cyber Summit, and we kind of stayed in touch since then. He actually came up from San Antonio once and spoke at one of Pwn School meetings. And so he's like one of the first people I knew that was probably a true red teamer. And so when I was getting started as a red team lead, Samuel was able to give me some tips. So I'm excited to have him on the show today. Welcome, Samuel.
I appreciate it, Phillip. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And as you were saying, I was really excited to have the opportunity to come up and speak at Pwn School. I made the 4.5, 5 hour drive to go present at the pizza shop, and it was a good time. It was a great community you have up there in Dallas. So I'm glad we stayed in touch since then and before Texas Cyber Summit, and it's been interesting kind of watching what you've done over the last few years. So I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, it's been interesting to follow your career as well. So for those that are listening that may not know you, could you tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Why not? So to bring it back to the beginning, so I got started with IT and security back when I was kind of towards the end of high school, early college. I was mainly focused on doing kind of web development with JavaScript and Python, and started to go to school. School got expensive, as most of you know, and then I jumped into the United States Air Force as a help desk in SysAdmin. So I was doing a lot of automation with batch scripts and PowerShell scripts, and pushing patches, and doing a lot of Active Directory stuff. And I was always working on my education on the side. I was focused on IT because I thought it was going to be, I was going to move into primarily just SysAdmin work for the rest of my career, right? And then an opportunity came up to become a tier 1 analyst at the Air Force's Computer Emergency Response Team, or the Air Force's SOC. So that was kind of my first experience doing real hands-on security work, in addition to like patch management and vulnerability assessment stuff. So I did that for just under a year, got the opportunity to move over to the penetration testing shop where we focused mainly on web apps. I really enjoyed that. And then I convinced my bosses that, hey, we need to stand up what's called a threat emulation or an adversary emulation shop, because we need to be able to test our defenses and test our detections and find ways of improving that. So I was very lucky. I had support, and I was able to recruit 5 amazing people. We started out, and after a few years of doing that, my contract with the Air Force ended, and then I went to the private sector. I worked with a company called Recon InfoSec, where I was the adversary emulation lead, and I focused on replicating adversaries based on threat intelligence to the highest degree possible, right? So whether that be the C2 they use or the particular type of malware they use, I was building that for our adversary emulation exercises that we would use for training and training corporate teams or corporate SOCs. And then we would also run those at one of the biggest blue team CTFs, was called OpenSOC, and that's usually ran at DEF CON, and I believe it's going on this year at DEF CON as well. But I haven't been involved in it because a couple months ago, I moved on to an organization called Cognizant, where I'm on the red team and focused on internal red team tasks. And that's where I'm at today. And that's a little bit of my background.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your background. That's a very interesting story. And that's really cool that when you're in the Air Force that they actually listen to you about starting the Adversary Emulation group or red team. That's really good that they listen.
So, just like with any organization you work in, it helps to have leadership or management that trust your word or trust your experience and what you can do and take a chance on you. And I was very lucky to have that in my leadership. It's not the case in most military branches to be able to have that kind of opportunity. So I took it and ran with it.
Yeah, that's what really surprised me, you mentioning that, because, in the industry, sometimes you have managers that listen, but you just kind of hear those stories. Not that I have firsthand military experience, but you hear some of those stories that, leadership doesn't want to listen to people. They've been doing this for a long time and they think they have the experience and they're not wanting to change the way they do things. So that's great that they did that.
Yeah,
so,
I think if we're talking on the military side, I do think we're seeing a change in upper level leadership taking it more seriously and putting a lot more investment into cybersecurity as a whole. So it was pretty great to see that kind of transition as I was leaving. And I'm hoping they're doing well nowadays.
So for some of the people listening, could you explain the difference between pen testing and red teaming?
Yeah, of course. So I'll start with red teaming because that's what I'm primarily focused on. Red teaming is basically the act of completing an objective or an objective focused assessment. So think about it from a pen testing perspective. Pen testing, you're going to be testing a network. You're trying to get your domain admin and, tell the customer or the client or your internal company, here are the things wrong that we found. Here are the vulnerabilities we found. If a bad guy got in, they could do X, Y, or Z. These things are high severity. They need to be fixed. On the red team side, we may be focused on, we're going strictly to grab this piece of data. We don't care about domain admin. We don't care about, sorry, cut out. Can you still hear me? Okay. All right. Yeah. We don't care about domain admin. We don't care about gaining access to somebody's share drives or anything like that. We're focused on a particular objective. And in this case, let's say we're going to collect this data and exfil it. That, to me, that is red teaming, being objective focused in your assessment or your operation.
Yeah, I like to hear everyone's definition of pen test and red team. There's a lot of confusion because there's a lot of in the industry that people just generically anything offensive cybersecurity is red team pen testing and not differentiate. So it's good that you shared that difference and good for people to know that and interesting to hear your definition of a pen test. That's a good way of describing it.
Thanks.
So just out of curiosity, what kind of, if someone was wanting to become a red teamer, what kind of advice would you give them on starting as a red teamer?
Yeah, so the biggest advice I would give somebody who wants to get into red teaming, whether they're in cybersecurity right now or they're wanting to get into cybersecurity and that's their ultimate goal, is to learn as much as possible. Always be curious about what you're testing or what you're learning. So if you're learning a particular programming language, you want to dig into it and find out as much possible about it. If you're a system administrator and you want to be a red teamer, understand how your network functions and how it can be taken advantage of. Because, at the end of the day, red team, we're trying to simulate or emulate a true threat actor, right? Either based on threat intelligence or not. And, having that basic understanding of your networking environment or your operating system environment is going to go a long way. So learn those foundational skills, stay curious, and practice a ton. Set up a small home lab. That's all you really need. It could be 2 virtual machines or 2 Docker containers, and practice and practice and practice and read and read and read.
So speaking of, it's interesting you mentioned be able to program or whatever. How important do you think be able to program a script is to someone that's going to be a red teamer?
So that's a tough question. How important is programming? you'll see a lot of times people say it's not required to work in security, right? You don't need to know how to program to be successful. And while that may be true to an extent, you're going to hit a point where you can either analyze this malicious payload because you understand programming logic, or you're not going to be able to analyze it. And that's from the defensive side. And from the offensive side, okay, cool. You can download these tool sets from GitHub and run them, but without the basic understanding of a language, a programming language, you're not going to really be able to customize that for your next engagement. Because a lot of times you're not going to be able to just download them and run them. They're not going to work in that environment. It's going to take some type of evasion techniques to build into your payload for it to function. And coming from kind of a computer science background, as I mentioned, I went to school a little bit for computer science before I joined the military. When I got into the military, that background helped me out so much because I was able to automate a lot of tasks. I remember when I was first a SOC analyst, I was always getting the malicious JavaScript alerts because, hey, I could read the language, I could understand what was going on. And that kind of, gaining those skills kind of propelled me to where I am today. And I use my programming skills every day. Even if I'm not writing a full-fledged, C# or C++ program, I'm still using that skill set to, modify some code for it to work or to function or to get this payload to work. So I think it's important. I don't think it's 100% required, but I encourage you to at least learn the basics.
Yeah, that's an interesting point of view, because one of the things for me, I never got that fluent in writing languages. I've taken Java course before. I've did self-study on Go and Python, but never really got fluent at it. But one of the things I did, especially going through the OSCP, is I learned how I could modify, exploit code or different scripts and stuff that I needed to do. I mean, I guess the only real programming I ever did was back in my SysAdmin days here. You mentioned batch files, writing batch files. That was one of the things I did. But it's interesting because each time I talk to people, someone says you need to know how to code, and then someone else, there's people like Alyssa Knight that actually got by without coding, but it's interesting to hear. But one of the things I see time after time is some of these people that are really sharp in the industry, like Harmjoy or ByteBleeder, these guys are writing tools and really know how to code. So good advice for people to at least know how to modify things, and knowing how to code, I can see where that could help a lot. So that's...
Yeah. And to kind of go off that example, you have two ends of the spectrum right there, Alyssa, and then you have Harmjoy. You don't have to be at Harmjoy's level, but I don't think many people are, right? Many of these people in this industry are not. The ones you see posting on Twitter, their latest tool they developed, that's kind of the higher end of the skill set, right, for the developing in InfoSec. What you don't hear a lot from is those kind of like mid-level players to low tier who have some experience. They can modify, like you were saying, you can modify a little bit, but it's not required to be all the way at the end. Sure, some niche areas, like if you want to get into your red team engineering where you're building the tool sets, you may need those skills. And same thing for building blue team tools. You may need those skills. They will go a long way to help you automate a lot of your tasks, but it's not going to make or break you to have a steady job in cybersecurity.
Yeah, definitely. It's just like other areas that are nice to haves. And when people are getting started out, you may not necessarily have to have that to get started, but good to learn along the way. Too many times people do let those things prevent them. Well, I don't know how to code. I'm going to learn Python before I take the OSCP course. And I think sometimes committing to that and learning the language really prevents people from getting ahead on learning the offensive security side of things.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not, you don't have to be a pro at the language, right? You just need to understand the syntax. Like, can you modify the if statement or change the target of this payload with the directory it's going to land? You know what I mean? That kind of stuff is the basics. That's what you need to understand to get started. And you don't have to be some, I'm a software engineer that turned into a tier 1 SOC analyst. No, that's not the thing, or I'm an entry level pen tester because now I was a software engineer. No, that's not how it works. I'm sure that's happened before. Someone's probably done that path, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for the majority of people, that's not necessary.
Yeah, sometimes it's just be able to minorly modify, something you downloaded from exploit DB. It's not compiling, but you need to go in there and massage it a little bit. Maybe some of the tabs or something, or maybe there was a return hit and knocked a line of code down from where it should be. Just getting that all aligned sometimes just to get that to compile properly.
I'll even throw out a little offensive security tip. A lot of times those payloads are done like that on purpose. So not everyone can just download them and run them. So
makes sense. So they're just the exploit creator is trying to be responsible, making sure that it's like a safety on a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So you mentioned building home labs to learn. So what do you think about now? Because, there's all these different options out there like Hack the Box, Try Hack Me, and those different resources. What do you think about those for people trying to learn?
Yeah, I've had this question a couple times, and I think it's a great resource. My one thing I would say when you're going to apply for jobs, document that experience and make sure you can speak to it. Because whether it's an old school thing, having a home lab, you built your home lab, you understand how this network functions because you built it, and you understand the tool sets in it because you built it. That if you could speak to it and show your interest, I think even using things like Try Hack Me and Hack the Box are enough. But you can't simply say, I have a Try Hack Me account, I'm in the top 20%, because I'm sure if you looked at the statistics, most people sign up for an account, do a couple challenges, and then they close out they don't touch it again for months. So if you can speak to that, and we can talk a little bit about the resume part. If you could tailor your resume to show that experience and maybe show your achievements somehow through those means, I think it's a great place for people who don't want to spend the time or the resources to build a home lab.
So what do you think about someone that's wanting to get, you mentioned the resume thing. So someone's trying to get into offensive security or red teaming. What are ways that if you saw that they're doing this, that you would consider interviewing this person? What are some things you'd like to see if someone's coming from like no actual professional experience?
So no offensive experience, just or they have some security experience maybe. One thing I would want to look for this would be beyond the resume. This is if I'm having a conversation with them. I want to see that curiosity, kind of let them take me on a journey when they talk about a particular subject they're interested in, right? Because you can list everything you want on a resume. When it comes down to having the conversation with the person, you're going to be able to tell what they're passionate about and what they're interested in. And this isn't to say you have to be super passionate about your job, but to succeed in some of these areas of security, like offensive security, most of us are really passionate about what we do, and we spend even our free time doing these things. And if you're showing me that you're putting in those efforts beyond your normal job duties that you have during the day, not to say that you have to spend every waking moment doing lab work, because no one can live like that. But even if you're just explaining some code you modified from exploit DB, and you tell me why you had to modify it, that kind of thing shows me, especially for a newer person who's like, oh, I just started doing Hack the Box and I had to modify this exploit to get it to work. So first off, you're already a step ahead of somebody of most candidates, because you're showing that you're taking the initiative to learn that piece of code in order to get it to work. And I think that's more of a conversational thing, right? Because you can list, like I said, everything possible on your resume, but if you can't speak to it, we're going to have an issue, I think.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because when people, when someone's interviewing you, they look at that LinkedIn profile or that resume, and if you got Burp Suite on there and you don't know it, that's not good, because you're going to get asked questions, and us as interviewers aren't trying to be jerks. We're just trying to find out how well you know that. I've been on interviews where someone come in and said they knew Burp Suite, and I could tell they weren't telling the truth, and I kind of asked them just to kind of test their honesty. Is I said, how would you rate your Burp Suite experience on a level to 1 to 10? And they gave themselves like an 8 or something like that. And they obviously didn't know what they were doing. So when I think you're writing your resumes, make sure you're honest about it. If you want to put things on there, maybe even share that you learned this through educational means and not necessarily professional, just to kind of, put that on there, but be honest. So,
yeah, it's one thing to say you're familiar with it as opposed to you're experienced with it. And yeah, you're right. If you put it on your resume, be prepared to be asked about it. I think over a year ago when I was getting out of the Air Force, I applied for a job, and I had done some development in, I think it was like Go at the time that I was working on, but I was by no means an expert. Like I could create a payload in it, but that's about it. But that was my basic understanding, and then I started getting hammered with development questions about Golang. And I'm like, I'll be honest, I built a payload or an exploit or whatever in it, but beyond that, I haven't touched it, So just be careful with what you put on your resume because you will get asked about it.
Yeah, and I think some people just not to just keep harping on the subject, but I think a lot of times people don't think about that. You're getting, the interviewer's got to figure out questions to ask you, and they're going to look at your resume to do that. So,
yeah. Another thing with we're talking about interview stuff, keep up with current trends and exploits. While as a red teamer, you probably won't be using the hottest, latest exploit all the time because you may not need it, right? And that's the thing about red teaming is you only use what you need. You don't just, Wild West it out there because we don't want to be too noisy. So but keep up with the latest because you will get asked about those things. And it also shows your interest in security outside of, monitoring SIEM alerts or running in-map scans or something like that.
So along those same lines, how important do you think it is for someone that's interviewing or just knowledge in general to not even just know the exploits, but do you think it's important to kind of follow the cybersecurity news on the latest breaches and that sort of thing?
I think it depends on where you're applying because I've interviewed at places that have asked me questions about, the latest tweet that someone sent out about exploit XYZ. But then I've also interviewed at places where that conversation didn't even come up. Like, where do you get your news from? So I would just say as a general rule of thumb in offensive security, you need to be up to date on what's going on. You don't have to know everything. Like it's impossible. I go to one of my favorite websites called Malpedia. I think it's a German website that's a free threat intelligence, combines all recent threat reports on particular APTs or malware families. And there's so much data uploaded every day. Like no one can possibly read it all and still do their day job. But at least hitting the highlights, right? Being familiar with the conversational topics so you can carry a conversation, because if you have that background experience, those foundational skills, you should be able to have a conversation about it without knowing, oh yeah, it hits this particular address in memory to trigger the exploit, that kind of thing. That may not be necessary, but depending on the job you're interviewing, it could be.
Yeah, I was just curious to get your input on that because last year I had an interview for a red team job, and it kind of made me wish I'd kept up with things a little more current because there was like some current event that happened and I really didn't read the information to really know what happened during that breach, which didn't seem to be that big of a deal, but I'm not really sure. And this was like more of a upper level manager type. So they're really not getting into the weeds of things. And so maybe that's just kind of different on the level of management you're speaking with.
Yeah, it could be the level that you're speaking with, and it could be the company or the organization you're interviewing with, because oftentimes you're not going to know what their tech stack looks like or what their environment looks like during the interview process. No one's going to give you that information. So they may be asking you these questions because they're relevant to their environment. And that's kind of a difficult thing, because how do you balance, keeping up your skill set and knowing all the most recent threat reports or threat intel? It's a difficult task.
So just kind of curious to get your thoughts on, like, from, the red teaming perspective, how is cloud playing into some of these red team engagement nowadays?
So coming from my background and doing a little bit of consulting, and then where I am now, obviously I'm not going to speak about the details of where I am, what we do, but I think overall as an industry, we're seeing a shift to cloud resources. And like most things with organizations, they're adopting these technologies without putting the foresight or the forethought into the security piece, right? They're jumping into cloud because, hey, it might be cheaper. It's less hardware we need to store on our site, and we can manage it from anywhere. And obviously, cloud is a huge enabler, a force multiplier for any organization, any business. But a lot of times, we're seeing that they're not taking the proper security steps to get into that, to get it ready, but to be attacked, basically, because you put something on the internet, it's going to be attacked.
Yeah. So yes, cloud. So cloud is supposed to be more secure, isn't it?
There are security options. They're not usually enabled by default. What about you, from your perspective?
It's kind of funny what you hear sometimes. That you hear some management, they've been sold a bill of goods that, it's cloud's more secure or something. You hear that from time to time. But it seems like from the red team perspective, I can see a heavy focus on the Azure related stuff because, you got the Azure AD and then your hybrid Active Directory, your on-prem and in the cloud. So I can see how some of those could be important, or if you're trying to come in through Office 365, exploiting some of that, I can see where there's some there.
Yeah. And like I was talking about earlier, like if it serves a purpose during the engagement to achieve the objectives, it'll most likely be targeted, right? But if it's not even on the path to the goal, we may not even touch it as red teamers.
Yeah, that's interesting. Going back to your definition, because it seems when you look at the pen testing, one of the ways I describe pen testing and red teaming, the kind of a simplified description I give is pen test, you're trying to find every vulnerability that can be exploited, and red teaming, you're trying to find those that can be breached. Maybe you'll find more than one way in to maintain persistence if you need to get back in, but that's kind of it. So, but a lot of times people there's a lot of misunderstanding in that area. So,
yeah, I think that's due to like different organizations using the terminology in the wrong way, and we're seeing that across the industry almost constantly, I think. But yeah, kind of that example, as a red teamer, you're objective focused, right? And like you said, if this exploit will provide me access and persistence, I'll use it. But if I can get around with what I find on the environment, I'll use that instead of trying to trip any alarms, or because the thing about using the most recent exploits, this is another offensive security tip. They may be handy, they may be the quick win, but if an organization has a defensive team, they're probably going to be hyper aware of the type of logs or forensic artifacts that are generated from those particular attacks. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I guess it also brings some value to sometimes be able to test some of the older type of exploits to see if those would still work or not too. I guess there's some value in that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And like most AVs, if you're still running standard AV, like those signatures drop off after a while because those databases can only hold so much.
Well, we're getting down towards the end of the show. Is there anything we haven't discussed that you'd like to share? Any advice or anything you'd just like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, we'll start with the advice. If your ultimate goal is offensive security as a whole or red teaming, and you're either in security or you're not in security at the moment, work on those foundational skills. Even if you are in security, work on those foundational skills and keep up on the latest exploits, even if you're not going to be using them. Play around in your home lab or your subscription service like Try Hack Me or Hack the Box or whatever the other ones are out there as well. I do want to give a shout out to 0 Point Security's Certified Red Team Operator course. It's an amazing course, great refresher if you want to do Active Directory stuff. So in addition to like those kind of courses, just like I said, learn the foundational skills, network with people, join Discords or local meetups. If you're lucky enough to be in Dallas, there's plenty of them. But find your major cities, major areas, or even online, honestly. Like most stuff, because, the pandemic is virtual. So it's very easy to get in contact with people who are willing to provide kind of that mentorship. And that's very important, is finding yourself a good mentor when you're progressing into those kind of more advanced stages of your career. Because I'm me personally, I'm always chasing that, right? I'm always chasing my mentor. I want to be as good as them. I want to have those same skills, and maybe one day I'll pass them. And when you are seeing eye to eye as them as a peer, you can look back at your journey and see all that you've accomplished to get there, and all those skills you've gained, all those foundational skills, and that's something you can look forward to at the end of your career. Those of you listening. And one final shout out. So check out my YouTube channel. I like to hack things. I do cybersecurity content, how to get started, what kind of certs you should take, some technical stuff, like PowerShell type stuff, or more focused on offensive security stuff. So please check that out.
Yeah, and we'll be sharing the social media as well as that YouTube information with our listeners. So thanks for joining us again. I really love this conversation. It was good catching up with you.
Yeah, likewise, Phil. I really appreciate you having me, and I'm always excited to help people to get into offensive security because it's so much fun.
I guess that's why we get along so well, so I like that.
Yeah.
So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next episode.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hacker Factory podcast with Phillip Wylie. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.